Are you an adventurer looking to take your hunt to the next level? Then you're in the right place. Welcome to East Meets West Hunt with your host, Bo Martonic.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the East Meets West Hunt podcast presented by onX. I wanted to start off by talking about a new feature that onX has specifically within their Hunt app, and that is where you can change your waypoint colors. And why that's important for me is recently, so I've been using the onX Hunt app for quite a while, and I have a lot of waypoints on there. So if you go to certain areas in Pennsylvania or Colorado or a place I've hunted, there's a lot of waypoints, probably some that I need to clean up a little bit. But what I'm able to do is, at least my strategy with this, is I'm able to change the colors for certain things that stick out, or you could change it by year. So say any waypoint in 2018 would be red, and any of your new ones in 2019, you could be blue. Specifically, how I'm using it for whitetail hunting this year is I did a lot of spring scouting. I marked a lot of waypoints, rubs, scrapes, bedding areas, things like that. And, well, when I'd mark places for tree stands, they could kind of get lost in the mix. So I went through and identified all of the tree stand spots in blue. So when I look at a map from a big view, I can see them stick out right away. That's where these tree stands are, or not really where a tree stand is, but where I could potentially hunt out of a tree stand. And that really helps me when I'm game planning, as far as not forgetting about areas I've scouted, and also just kind of seeing a big picture and how the land lays out. And it's a really big part when scouting for mountain bucks specifically. So onX has offered up a code to all the listeners for 20% off the Hunt app. So if you want to use the code EMW, it'll save you 20% off on either the premium or the elite membership. So check that out on xmaps.com or on any of the app stores on your phone. The University of Elk Hunting, Corey Jacobson and Elk 101 have come out with the most comprehensive elk hunting course available for anyone from a beginner all the way up through elite elk hunters that have quite a bit of experience. And as I've talked about it before, I'm going through this course again for the fourth time, and recently I've been kind of a little bit low on time, so what I've been doing is downloading the audio portion of the course on the app, and I'm able to listen to it while I'm driving, doing some other things. Really reiterate it, and helps a lot with people when you're on time constraints, as it seems like we all are. So if you use the code EastMeetsWest at checkout, it'll save yourself 20% off that online course. And remember, investing in yourself is super important when it comes to these type of hunts. And lastly, Maven Optics. So Maven has come out with the highest quality binoculars, spotting scopes, rifle scopes at half the price of their competitors through their direct-to-consumer business model. Well, that's not any new news there. What is new is they have just dropped their new B5 series binocular. And what Maven's done with this new B5, it comes in a 15 and 18 magnification by 56. They have taken their B2 platform, which is one I've talked about in the past, my favorite. I have it in the 9x45. They've take that same prism and put it into this new B5 that allows extreme low light capabilities and even lighter in a lighter package. So in case you don't want to carry the spotting scope, anything like that, but you still want to be able to really, dive into doing some deep glassing, this new B5 is really cool. So you can check that out now at mavenbuilt.com. Use the code EastMeetsWest-gift. Save yourself. Well, actually, you're not saving yourself any money, but you are getting a free gift with that purchase. So check that out. And so now that that's out of the way, let's dive into what we have going on here today. So first of all, as far as news, the rattlesnake hunt that I talked about last week, the YouTube video is live now on my buddy Dave Church's YouTube channel called Noble Savage Outdoors. That's Noble Savage Outdoors. Check that out. Give him a subscribe and comment on the video. Check it out. Let me know what you think. It's about 20 minutes long, going through the whole process of the snake hunt, from the gear used through the actual hunt to cooking up the snake and everything in between. So definitely check that out and see what you think of it. And so today's guest that I have on the podcast is Abe Henderson from Alaska DIY. Abe he's a wild man. I mean, this guy has done some awesome hunts, guiding in Alaska, moved there from the lower 48. I mean, he's living the dream and just really, truly works his ass off to get to that point. He just got back from New Zealand. You hear him talk about a little bit in this episode about planning to go there, as we recorded this a few months ago. But Abe's a really great guy, and we're going to break down the process of planning an Alaskan hunt, and that's super important to me as I'm planning one for 2020 with a couple of friends of mine, and we're really looking forward to it. But it's something that's pretty overwhelming, and I always thought was out of reach to the normal population here, us that aren't rich by nature in any means, but it's truly not. And I'm excited to keep going through this process, and I could really use some feedback here on some more questions of what you got out of this with Abe and I, as we kind of did a little bit differently, where he kind of used me as a case study almost, where he's acting like we're not recording and we're just talking on the phone, and he's helping me go through the steps to think about how to plan this hunt. And we're going to definitely do a second part to it at some point. So think of some questions, shoot them over to me in email, Instagram messaging, or however else you want to get a hold of me there. I'd really appreciate that. So he has some online courses you'll hear him talk about on here that are hunt planning guides to make your dream a reality with hunting Alaska, and he's offering up all the listeners $50 off one of the online courses by using the code EMW2019. If you decide you want to look into whether it's his ADAC, Caribou hunt, or the Alaska Haul Road, or whatever that might be, the information that you'll get in there is, if you use one of the cost saving tips in there, it'll pay for the course itself when you go to do the hunt. And he's coming out with a whole bunch of other stuff, so definitely check out some of his stuff, and hope you enjoy this episode here. And I guess with that being said, let's just jump right into the episode here with Abe Henderson and Alaska DIY. All right, welcome back to another episode of the East Meets West Hunt podcast. So tonight, it's 9 o'clock here on the East Coast, 5 o'clock where my guest is out in Alaska. I have Abe Henderson on the line with Alaska DIY. What's up, buddy?
What's going on, man? How you doing?
Yeah, not too bad. It's a nice night here in Pennsylvania. Finally a night without some rain. What about you? What's going on?
Actually, we had rain all morning and all day today. I went for a run in the rain and shot my bow in the rain, which is always fun to do. And I don't mean that sarcastically. I really enjoy doing that because it seems like I'm always hunting in the rain, so it's real world practice,
Yeah.
But then this afternoon, the skies broke and it's beautiful and sunny and gorgeous, and it's a lovely spring day in Alaska, man.
Yeah, that's awesome. Before we started recording here, you were saying at this point in the year, you have about like 18 hours of daylight?
It's something like that. It's light till 10-ish. Well, what you have is a long grace periods, so long twilight in the evening, long kind of gray morning, much longer than areas in the lower 48, and just because you're so far north, but yeah, it's dark sometime around 10 or a little after. And then this morning I was up at 5 a.m. and it was like, there's a little light in the sky, but it wasn't really light until about 6. So you're talking, yeah, I guess 18 is a bit of a stretch. It's probably closer to like 16 right now, but by let's see, a month from now, it'll be all of 18, maybe 20. And, and the farther north you go, you'll go far enough north up by Fairbanks and north of there, and it just won't get dark. You know what I mean? So,
yeah. I remember I experienced that the first time last summer when I was up there for the solstice, and I was in, Anchorage, where you're at, and it was so weird. It'd be like 2:00 in the morning, and it's just like it would be 8:00 at night here, just kind of like dusk, and then it like would kind of get dark, and then it would just kind of turn right back.
Yeah, like June 21st or whatever the date that summer solstice normally is. Even farther south than here, like down in Homer, we've got pictures at midnight. It's like the sun's not up, but it's broad daylight. We're out fishing, having a good time.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then obviously the farther north that you go, there's areas where up in the Arctic where the sun never sets, just circles the sky. So kind of fun, which in fact, when I was researching the Haul Road Caribou Guide that I have on the website, which is kind of how to plan this road trip caribou hunt up north, the Haul Road goes all the way up to Prudhoe Bay, which is just short of the Arctic Ocean. So, basically as far north as you can drive, and on the continent almost. And yeah, I think the longest day up there, man, I'm going to get the number wrong, but the longest day up there is like, I want to say it's like 30 some days long, where the sun it's considered it's a day that's longer than a month, and yeah, so it's a land of extremes for sure, man.
Yeah, I would say it's like I said, it was super cool when we were there, and I was up for the Heather's Choice Company retreat last year, and we were out camping on a glacier, and I was with actually a guy pretty well, filmed one of your hunts, is going to film another one, Micah Ness, and we were up having some drinks and everything, and it felt like it was dinner time, and it was like 1:00 in the morning.
Yeah, it's hard to get kids to go to bed.
I bet. I couldn't imagine having young kids trying to get them to go to bed at a reasonable time.
Well, we raise pretty feral children, so we just kind of let them run amok and do their thing. But most of the time, that involves some form of fishing or just running on the beach or whatever. But so it's all good stuff. But yeah, if you're trying to hold down like some kind of school schedule or something like that this time of year, it gets really, really tough.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah, funny. I actually just got off the phone with Mike a minute ago, and we're planning our New Zealand trip, so that's pretty exciting. That's coming up quick. But Mike is a good dude.
Yeah, when are you leaving for New Zealand? I mean, actually, this podcast will probably, by the time it releases, you'll either be on the trip or just getting back. But when are you going on that?
I'm leaving, let's see, May 19th, so in about 10 days. Today's the 8th, right?
Yeah.
That we're recording this. And then returning June 6th. So we got a full 2 weeks there. You lose like a day of your life or something when you fly to New Zealand. I'm not quite sure how this works, but there's some kind of magic with that international date line or something where it takes 2 days to fly there. But when you fly back, you'll fly for like 24 hours and you get home the afternoon that you left. So I guess it all works out. I don't know.
That's weird. Yeah, that's really weird. Oh man. So what are you hunting in New Zealand?
Dude, we're going for tahr. I mean, just free range, run around in the mountains. They're like our mountain goats up here, but they got thicker horns, a little bit longer, and they got these big, shaggy, long-haired brown manes. Sometimes they can get pretty light and look kind of golden. They're just such a cool animal. They live all over the South Island, and they're a non-native species, like so many, basically all the large mammals there. And so there's basically no hunting regulations. You just show up, and there is it's a free hunting license or permit. I can't remember what they call it that you have to get, but then away you go. You can go hunting. No season, no bag limit. It's kind of a free for all. I'm kind of excited to do an extreme mountain hunt that can be as technical and challenging as you want it to be, but with no real restrictions. So
yeah, that's neat. I mean, like I've heard a lot about New Zealand, and I haven't researched it a ton myself, but it just sounds like a pretty amazing place. And it seems like this time of year, and a lot of times I see people going to New Zealand like in February and March and stuff because again there's no hunting season and it's when nothing else is going on in the lower 48 and Canada.
Well, and those people are smarter than we are. Because New Zealand's in the southern hemisphere, so the seasons are flipped. So they're going in like the equivalent of like maybe our September. So imagine like elk hunting or mule deer hunting in September in the west, those nice sunny mild temperatures. We're going in what might be considered like a late November, early December timeframe. So we're planning for snow and cold temperatures, and we're gonna be in the mountains, and hopefully it's not too rough. But I'm definitely looking forward to it. So, I mean, dude, mountain hunting is amazing. I can't get enough of it. So
yeah, dude, I'm excited to see it. And you're doing a whole film of the trip, aren't you?
Yeah, we'll put out another like 20-minute film basically that'll go to YouTube, like the ADAC film that we did last fall that was released this spring. A little bit different format. I'm kind of excited about this one. Micah and I are both going to film each other. So in the ADAC film, Micah was behind the camera the whole time, and a buddy from Washington State came up. That was his dream hunt, was to hunt caribou on ADAC, and so we went out and we were both in front of the film or in front of the camera for that, and that was a great experience. We had a really fun time, and ADAC is a wild place. But on this trip, it's just Micah and myself, and we're both going to run cameras and film each other and kind of try to play creatively with the high-end production that Silverline offers. Micah's amazing behind the camera and then also in the editing room, but kind of play creatively with dropping that veil of in front of camera versus behind camera, and maybe a little bit more vlog style, or kind of we're going to explore that space, and I'm excited about it.
Yeah, that'll be cool to kind of mesh the two, and I'll be interested to see. And I'm sure with Micah's talent, which I've had Micah on the podcast before, his talent is unbelievable. The guy can take photos, the video, and then just like you said, his editing skills are they're unmatched.
Yeah, he does a very good job, and he's just a good dude to be on the mountain with as well. Just a solid guy. So I was introduced to him by Heather, at BHA Rendezvous last year, actually. Heather's choice is Heather Kelly is a pretty amazing human being, and she's been a great connector in my life as well as it sounds like yours. Like I wanted to come and crash the Heather's Choice party last year, the retreat, and I think we were camping somewhere, so I didn't get a chance to stop by and grab a beer. But I did hear that you guys were all in town, and she had told me about you before we ever met. So she's one of those special people that just like, I don't know, I feel like she pulls all these different threads that extend out to all parts of the globe, and she knows a lot of really cool people, and she's got a gift for making connections and with like-minded folks, and it's pretty cool. Yeah,
when I was up there for that retreat, it was one of the neatest things that I got to experience, because it was a mix of, you had people like Micah and John Whipple who are, really big into hunting, and then you had people that were not exposed to hunting and weren't hunters at all, that were all together camping, and, they're asking some interesting questions about hunting, and, there was a couple that were into dog sledding, and like, it was just a super, I don't even know if that's the right term, but it was just really cool to kind of get that mixture of people together, and, everyone had an open mind, and just, it was fun.
That's cool. Yeah, I feel like they do a good job of kind of transcending those boundaries of hunting versus the non-hunting or non-consumptive outdoor crowd,
Yeah, that's for sure. So I guess we kind of skipped over it a little bit here, but I'd like you, Abe, to get into your background and tell us a little bit who you are.
Yeah, for sure. No, that's fine. That's the way these things go, man. They take on a life of their own, don't they? So my name is Abe Henderson. I'm a full-time hunting guide in Alaska. So I work for an outfitter, and so I spend about 6 to 7 months in the field each year between big game hunting and then sea duck guiding in the fall. So we have a lot of fun, and I guide for a lot of different species, brown bear, black bear, moose. Haven't done any caribou really to speak of, but sheep, mountain goat. Done a little bit of bison hunting, Sitka blacktail. I mean, I don't know if I'm missing anything there, but pretty cool, extensive list of species to hunt here in Alaska, and I've been fortunate enough to be able to guide for most of those species. So that's how I make, that's primarily how I make my livelihood and support my family. And then as kind of a side project during the off season, excuse me, I started Alaska DIY because I have a whole bunch of friends and, even family back home who has always wanted to hunt in Alaska, always dreamed of coming up for a caribou or a moose hunt or something like that. And never really was able to put it together or knew where to start or how to get started planning a hunt. And so I kind of recognized this big information gap. And even though I work as a guide and hopefully soon I'll be an outfitter and work for myself and have a guide business, but I still have a heart within my, I myself am still like just a blue collar DIY backcountry public land hunter. I mean, that's what I do when I have my free time to go do stuff, So I saw a need there and thought, hey, I'm probably not the most qualified person in Alaska to do this, but I wanted to fill that niche just to kind of start by helping my buddies and my family and kind of scratching an itch that I had. So I started putting together content for specifically aimed to folks in the lower 48 who've always wanted to come up to Alaska and hunt, but didn't know how to plan that hunt. So they're basically online, courses, or I call them how-to guides that are, how to plan a hunt, kind of A to Z of logistics and gear and understanding the animals and cost breakdown. There's a ton of information in each one. And they're for sale on the website. So it's kind of a little side business that I'm working on building up, but also just kind of like I said, a labor of love with helping people just kind of live out their dreams, man. There's a lot of cool people that I know that are just good folks, family men working a job and kind of have that dream of coming up here and experiencing something really cool. And it's attainable for sure, but it is intimidating trying to figure that out.
Yeah, no, that's for sure. And it's funny you say that because I'm in the process of trying to, with a couple buddies of mine, a good friend of mine, Michael, and my cousin Mason, trying to plan a hunt in 2020. So next year up there, and, originally planning for moose, but, kind of open to some other species from a do-it-yourself standpoint. And we've done what, a lot of homework, and Michael specifically has done a ton of calling, air taxis and a whole bunch of other different stuff. And it's been a process, man. And not having experience doing it, it's a little bit more difficult than planning like a Rocky Mountain hunt or something like that.
Yeah, Alaska, I'm kind of stumbling over my words. Alaska is accessible. It's not overly difficult to make a self-guided do-it-yourself hunt up here happen, on the one hand. On the other hand, if you've never been here before and you've never dealt with the logistical challenges or the actual cost of getting it done and getting an animal home, it is a significant challenge with a fairly steep learning curve up front. Once you get kind of past that learning curve, then it's something that, basically any hunter who can plan an out-of-state mule deer hunt or elk hunt, in the western states could easily plan a hunt up here every year or two or three and, make it a regular thing. It's not, it doesn't necessarily have to be that expensive or that complicated, but for the first timer who's never been up here before, man, there's a learning curve for sure. But yeah, tell me about what stage in the research are you guys so far, and have you guys nailed anything down yet?
No, we haven't nailed anything down, but we so we got to the point where we decided, or what we thought we wanted to do is hunt moose. So we wanted to hunt moose, and kind of our idea of the perfect hunt is flying in to an area with a bush plane air taxi into. We wanted to hunt, instead of like a typical kind of like, it's like a swampy area, more or less like a mountain spot and stalk type moose hunt. It was kind of what we were looking at. And we'd talked to some people up there, found a few units we were looking at. The one that's ideal, and we actually had an air taxi that said yes, that they would take us in and it was reasonable priced, is a draw unit. And so that was kind of a little bit of a roadblock, but still keeping eyes open and researching some different units and just trying to figure out, like there's so many different components to it where, certain units have, like a 50-inch minimum as far as the width of the moose, and, others there's just like a whole bunch of different components to that. So it took us a while to understand all of that and see exactly what we were looking for. And then trying to call these air taxis, again, just basically cold calling them, was one, difficult to get a hold of some people. And two,
I could see that.
And two, 95% of them tried to talk us out of the idea.
Oh, just out of curiosity, why did they try to talk you out of it?
So they basically said that with people coming from the lower 48, and if you had not hunted Alaska before, that you should consider caribou, blacktail, or some other species, or black bear, rather than actually going right for a moose, just from the standpoint of how big the animals are and getting them out, and from the standpoint that we have 3 people, and they said, your odds of success, most likely you could take one moose between the 3 is, but it's not really possible for all 3 of you to have an opportunity. Yeah.
No, honestly, whether it's exciting news to hear or not, I think they're right on. I mean, they're giving you good advice.
Mm-hmm.
So like even through Alaska DIY and a lot of information I put out, I don't recommend a moose hunt for a first hunt. I think it's much better as a second or even a third hunt. If I could just set somebody up who had never been to Alaska before and was just like, they came to me and was just like, just tell me what to do and I'll do it, I would say sick a blacktail, then come back for caribou, then come back for moose. And there's a lot of reasons for that, but I think they give you good advice. And dude, I remember there was a younger version of myself that I would, if I was in your shoes, I'd be like, well, go screw yourself. Like I'm a tough guy. I can figure it out. I can move a moose around. Now, being a slightly older and more experienced version of myself who has I have moved some moose around personally. It's not a joke, man. Those things they're huge. And not only is it physically extremely taxing, extremely challenging, logistically, I mean, it's so much meat and the horns are so big. It's the most expensive self-guided hunt that you're going to do in Alaska. Mooses, just because getting that animal out and depending on how much of it, what of it you want to get all the way home in terms of meat and antlers and how you're going to do all that. It's there's some serious logistical challenges there for the first timer. So no, I don't think they gave you bad advice. Even though you guys might, you probably kept calling to try to find someone who to work with you, but yeah, man, I don't know. I think starting with caribou is a really smart choice. So where are you guys at? Have you decided to press on or what are you going to do?
So we've kind of all talked about it and we're open to doing caribou. So I was open to all 3 species. The other guys, and for, good reasons, but they decided they're like, I don't know if a blacktail hunt is what I want to do. And it's, it's understandable. I mean, from when you go to Alaska, you think of, big antlers, big animals, and, a blacktail is, really they're smaller than a whitetail, aren't they?
Yeah. I mean, their body shape is a lot different, but on average, they're definitely smaller. We've taken some big bodied bucks, but I don't know what their live weight would be. But yeah, dude, they're smaller than a whitetail on average for sure.
And I think that's something that, a lot of people have a hard time getting past saying, oh, I'm going to Alaska and I'm going to shoot a deer, but anyway, so in the process, kind of what we got to is we wanted to explore options with caribou, whether that be the haul road or ideally it would still be a fly-in, hunt. And I know that's more expensive and more logistically, complicated, but that's kind of what the kind of experience we're looking for.
Yeah, gotcha. Dude, I get it because even when I recommend Sitka Blacktail, and I love hunting Sitka Blacktail, I've guided quite a few Sitka Blacktail hunts, and then I shot a couple last year with my longbow, which was just a blast during the rut. But dude, when you're talking about a really big buck being like 100 inches of antler, gross,
Yeah.
I mean, that's just hard to get excited about if you're back east hunting whitetails, and you're dreaming of Alaska. It's like, man, I could shoot 100-inch buck here. I don't want to, pretty easily, probably, I imagine. You don't want to. You're going for something like you said, bigger horn and more exotic, more like iconic far north species. So
Yeah.
it's hard to get people excited about Sitka Blacktail. But honestly, man, they are such a cool animal to hunt and such a great adventure. Doing it on Kodiak or Prince of Wales, it's like they offer different experiences, but they're just such cool places to see. And it's a hunt that I'll do a lot of, probably every year just because it's so much fun. But I get it. I hear it a lot from folks. It's like, yeah, I don't want to go shoot a small deer. The advantage is that killing a Sitka Blacktail up here, for one, you're hunting a deer. So 99% of hunters, probably pretty safe to say 100% of hunters coming up here are familiar with deer hunting, if they're thinking of coming and hunting in Alaska. And so Sitka Blacktail don't act really differently than, like mule deer out west. They're not as cagey, they're a little easier to hunt. They're plentiful. So that level of familiarity with the species, I think, is a huge advantage, for kind of cutting that learning curve. Because when you talk about hunting caribou or hunting moose, all of a sudden you've got a new species to try to figure out to hunt in a new location a long ways from home with different regulations and different logistical components for getting out there and getting back. So that kind of, it's built into that steep learning curve, right? But when you talk about hunting deer, it's like, oh, okay, that, most people could come and figure out how to successfully hunt Sitka Blacktail pretty quickly. And so high success rates on Sitka Blacktail. And then when you shoot one, man, I mean, you can put all the boned out meat basically in one box and check it as freeze it and check it as a piece of luggage and fly it home, and you're good to go. The horns fit in basically any of your bags, that you might have checked, just bundle some clothes up inside that little basket rack and away you go. And it's pretty straightforward, man. But so there are some major advantages there for like getting into that learning curve, or like increasing your odds of success. That's a big one. But I get it, man, because not everybody gets excited about it for sure.
And and the thing is, and I'm sure like myself and the guys I'm going with would be super excited if we did it. It'd be a great experience. But I guess it's just something that I know we kind of had our hearts set on, like a moose or caribou to go with it. So like I said, with yourself and a lot of the others that I've talked to that I respect their opinion on, telling us that, maybe moose isn't a great first option. We're definitely considering other options at this point.
Gotcha. Yeah, for sure. The other thing too, Bo, is that, hey man, I'll guide a lot of people who it's their first time to Alaska, and by the end of the trip, they're like already talking about plans to come back. Right. Mm-hmm. It just has that kind of impression on people. And then I've guided people who are on their 12th trip to Alaska, and they're planning their next trip. I mean, it's one of those things where if you love hunting and you love adventure, you love big, open, wild, beautiful country and the animals that live there, it's an easy place to fall in love with. And so I think a lot of people look at like a moose hunt in Alaska. If you're from the lower 48, you primarily hunt deer or turkeys, whatever, you see it as a once in a lifetime trip. Like, you're going to do this once, and what'll happen. And this is why I don't think twice about recommending somebody coming up and hunting Sitka Blacktail or caribou before moose, is because if you come up and you're going to love it, you're going to want to come back. So you might as well help yourself out on the front end by, tackling a species that's a little easier, a little more logistically simple, just less work overall involved to kind of, make that learning curve a little bit easier for your first trip, because you're going to fall in love. You're going to want to come back and hunt something else. So you might as well, you know what I mean? You might as well do it so you have incremental steps instead of a huge hurdle with like a big moose out up front. And then you're going to want to come back and hunt caribou and bear and whatever else anyway. So,
yeah, no, I understand what you're saying. And I'll tell you what, when I went up there just again with the Heather's Choice Company retreat there, like I just fell in love with everything, and it was killing me not to be hunting something. And I believe me, I enjoyed myself. I loved everything about it. And Heather and Brad had said, like, come up and black bear hunt with us, and that's not as logistically complicated because it basically I could go, to their place or somewhere around there. You don't need to fly out to hunt them, and it's open 12 months out of the year.
Yeah, there's areas where you can, they hibernate in the wintertime where they're hard to come by. But yeah, there's areas here. I was just talking to my 2 teenage boys last night about going and doing some black bear hunting in late June, early July when I get back from New Zealand, So it's like midsummer, but midsummer in Alaska, if you hit 70 degrees, it's a hot day. And, you get up in the mountains, it's even cooler than that. So, yeah, so it got a little bit different feel to it. Everything's green and lush, and yeah, it's a nice time to be out, but there's a lot of opportunity up here, man, for sure. But yeah, so when I teach people like how to plan a hunt in Alaska, I usually break it down into different questions that need to be answered, which is kind of boring. But it's basically the who, what, when, where, why, how, and one of the mistakes that I used to make that I see a lot of people make is you get on like in Google, like moose hunting in Alaska or DIY moose Alaska or self-guided moose hunting in Alaska. I don't know if you guys did that when you were doing your research.
Yeah.
What I'm just curious, what was your experience when you like clicked, enter and you got the Google search results and you started going through it? Like, how did that process go down for you?
It was, you have to filter through a lot of bullshit before you find, maybe one piece out of 200 that's worthwhile. I guess is what I'd say. A lot of time spent on it.
Yeah, and if you got to 200, then you stuck with it longer than I would say most people do. Just in my experience talking to people, I think it's so overwhelming. Like I still find myself doing it sometimes, and I know better. Because I tell people like the last thing you want to do is like vague and unspecific research online. Like that's kind of like the worst way to start researching a hunt. But that's dude, I still do it sometimes too.
Yeah.
But so let me ask you this. Like, do you mind if we just I just ask you a few questions and maybe I could be kind of helpful a little bit, or would you rather just talk about stuff in in more general terms?
No, let's go through it as if you're kind of helping me here.
Okay, cool. So what I usually do is I start with scarcity when planning a hunt, and sometimes this works, and then sometimes there's kind of like I'll start with why. But for the sake of dialing it in, let's start with scarcity. And what I mean by that is you guys are looking out to 2020, so you're about 18 months out roughly, maybe a little bit less. Is there any resource or anything when you're thinking about planning your hunt that's like a major limitation for you? In other words, are you going to be on a shoestring budget hunt because money is a major factor for you guys, and you're going to try to make it as cheap of an experience as possible so that you can actually make it happen? Or are you limited by you can only get away for a certain amount of days because work is pressing, or you can only get away a certain time of year? Or is there some kind of is it really important to hunt with certain people, or you see what I mean by scarcity? Yeah. It's there's some limiting factor that's kind of built into how you're going to plan your hunt. Do you have anything like that that's really pressing?
Not really. We all got together and talked, and we're like, all right, what do we want out of this? And we all wanted the best experience possible, and that's why we've been talking about this for about a year now and started putting money aside and saving. We're we're going to make this a great experience. We don't want to cheap out on it. I don't want to go and spend $10,000 on a trip. I'm not going to be able to do that, but I want to have the best experience possible, and we all agreed on that. So I guess to an extent money isn't going to be a huge limiting factor. And then, and the three of us that are going, we all know each other really well. We're all comfortable with each other. And honestly, there wouldn't be, any other people I'd rather be put in a miserable, when I say miserable, you know what I mean, as far as in hunting situations, it's not always, rainbows and gumdrops, and these guys are, ones I'd want to be with. So that's kind of what, and as far as a time frame, we kind of said about 2 weeks we could all do.
Okay.
So from a time frame.
Okay, cool. So the reason I like to start with scarcity is because sometimes that is a factor for people. And if there is one pressing thing, one major limitation, then that's where you have to start to build your hunt around it. Otherwise, you're going to keep having all these false starts where you get started with an idea and then it doesn't work out because of this, and you have to back up and go and start over. So just as an example, maybe somebody's listening and being like, I don't get it. Why is he talking about scarcity like this? For me as a hunting guide, hunting season is my guide season. That's when I make money. So it's very difficult for me to fit a hunt in for myself while most popular seasons are open. So one of the reasons why we did the ADAC film was I had a narrow window in October where I had a little bit of time off between hunts when most of the moose caribou seasons shut down in September, at the end of September, and before I went to Kodiak to guide mountain goat and Sitka blacktail hunts. And so I had this narrow window. And ADAC was one of the few places in Alaska that had an open caribou season, right? So then initially, right there, boom, there was an opportunity, and that's one of the main reasons why we went and did that. So that's a limiting factor for me. But for other people, if you have this dream of taking a loved one, like I've thought about getting my dad up here, who's almost 70 years old. And if I were to do that, then the limiting factor or the scarcity would be okay, I have to plan a hunt that my dad's going to be able to do. And he's still in good health, but he's just not as physically capable as somebody, in their 20s, 30s, or 40s. And so I'm going to plan a different hunt, and also plan a hunt that will just be more fun, maybe less, somebody else. It's not really a scarcity, but maybe a major priority would be somebody with a goal of shooting a Boone and Crockett or a Pope and Young animal. They're going to plan a different hunt than I would plan if I was inviting my dad up to just have a cool experience with him and share, show him Alaska for the first time, at least on the hunting side.
Yeah.
So does that kind of make sense, at least at high level?
Yeah, no, that's a very good, good point. And, everybody's got to be on the same page with it, like you're saying, because if you're in a hunting party and say you got us three guys going and one of them has a limiting budget or time or physical capabilities, then you have to take that in accountable. You have to account for that. And I get what you're saying.
Yeah. So it sounds like you guys are in a cool place though, where you can each take 2 weeks. There's not any major limiting factors. So then I would say start with why. Try to nail that down right off the bat, which you already basically described that or alluded to that, which was you want to have this really cool adventure with close buddies, right?
Yeah. Yep. And we want, an experience that's, has a little bit of type 2 fun in it, a little bit that's difficult and, gets us going. My buddy Michael that's going, he's got a little bit of a different attitude with things where it kind of scares me because he likes risks to a point that scares me.
Yeah.
And, he wants to be put in some of the worst case scenarios, but anyways, yeah, that's, we want just an awesome adventure, but at the same time, we do want to have success with it too. We do want to come home with an animal. That's the goal, to do that. If we kind of, said if we can get 2 out of the 3 of us to come home with something, we'd be really happy.
Yeah. Okay. So high priority is not only a cool experience, and what you mean by type 2 fun, I'm assuming you're referring to, I think it's Steven Ranella was the first one to start talking to it in those terms. I could be wrong, but it's the kind of fun that it's not fun while you're experiencing it, but then later when you look back, it seemed fun.
It's fun to talk about.
So fun to talk about. Yeah. That was ADAC for us. It was a bit of a suck fest while we were there. And then later it was just oh man, we got to go back. But I think we started saying that once we were back in town with a roof over our head and warming up with our clothes coming out of the dryer kind of a thing.
Yeah. And we want to have, some of that, but and enjoy it at the same time. But we're not looking for like any sort of gravy, I guess, hunt, which I don't know if anything in Alaska is, but I think you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, and I was just going to say I wouldn't worry about that. Like, if you've never been here before, just plan any hunt in Alaska, and the odds are you'll get a little bit of the suckfest experience, the Type 2 fun at some point during your trip. So, yeah, for sure, man. So, okay, cool. So, here's what I recommend. So, I kind of have a system where I take 10 questions, the who, what, when, where, why. So that's like 6 questions, and how. And we've already talked about the why, right? Yep. So I like to prioritize those questions, right? So I take I call them 5 secrets. It's kind of cheesy. I kind of want to reword it because they're not really secrets, but they're just like different things that I've found that can really assist you, they're a bit counterintuitive. So I guess that's why I've called them that. So they're a bit counterintuitive. Can you hear that in the background?
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, I think my son was in charge of getting pizza out of the oven, and now I'm realizing that the house is full of smoke and there's an alarm going off.
Oh, jeez.
Right. Hey, Josiah. Sorry. You got this under control, buddy? Okay. All right. He's 13. He's capable, I think. No, he is. He's awesome. He says he's got it under control. So I'm just going to carry on like nothing is happening. Bo knows how to edit, he said, so we can just clip this right out.
It depends if I want to edit.
Yeah, if you don't want to edit, that's fine. The Henderson household is full of smoke while Dad's on, talking to a microphone on a podcast with Bo from Pennsylvania.
That's
great. So where was I? Oh, I was just this little method that I kind of use. I think it's pretty good. Might need some fine tuning, but it's something that kind of makes a lot of sense to me when I'm planning my hunts. But anyway, so it's like start with scarcity or start with why if you don't have a major limiting factor. So that's like number 1, and then number 2 would be like prioritize then procrastinate, which typically it's not really good advice to procrastinate, but in this case, what I mean by that is you take those 10 questions and actually just the first 6 questions, the who, what, when, where, why, and how. I don't think I'm missing one there, but take those and prioritize them, right? And you really kind of want to focus on the first 1 or 2 or 3, and you're going to forget all the rest of the questions that are lower priority, right? And that's the procrastination part. And so what I'm trying to do here is encourage people to like really get focused about their research instead of like going to Google and saying DIY moose hunt in Alaska, right?
Yeah.
So you're clarifying what you want out of an experience, what's really important to you, or what the major limiting factors are for you to start with, and then we're going to prioritize those questions: who, what, when, where, why, how. And so then the next one is like focus more, research less. So you're going to really drill in on those first few, and you're going to do really focused research on like you're going to nail down a question, and we can do this if you want to, but you kind of identify a specific question that you have, is as specific as possible. And then when you go to actually start doing research, you're just researching the answer to that question. And so what it does is it takes the whole hunt planning process. You've boiled it down into like manageable bite-sized pieces, but you've done it really smart because you've prioritized first. So you've got manageable bite-sized pieces, but you're tackling, you're researching the most important ones first, and then the later ones will come. Then sometimes they'll just kind of snap into place as you go through the process. Mm-hmm. And then I'm a big fan of leveraging your network, and what I mean by that, it's a network that most people don't really know that they have, and that's just reaching out on social media through forums and stuff like that, and just talking to folks. And I think there's some really good ways to do that and some really bad ways to do that, but talking to folks who have been there, done that, quote unquote experts, that they might not be like, guides or outfitters. They might not be celebrities or anything like that, but just people who have been and done that hunt before or hunt in a similar area. Finding somebody on Instagram who's done a moose hunt in Alaska, man, you have a very specific question, not just general like, hey, where'd you hunt kind of a thing. Like that's not going to get you anywhere, right?
Yeah. No, and it's funny because all I did was I had a post about a picture of us planning. We were having some beers in my basement, planning this, hunt, getting everybody together. And I had a guy reach out to me. He's like, man, I've hunted twice, do it yourself, moose hunts in Alaska, and he was super helpful. He's like, this is the airlines we went with and blah, blah, blah. And the air taxi that he went with was, I just said that we didn't really have a limiting budget, but this was pretty astronomical compared to the others, but their success rate is extremely high.
Was it Renfro's?
That's exactly who it was. Yep.
Yeah, they're out of Bethel. They shoot some huge moose, and they've got phenomenal hunting out there. But yeah, they're high. You're talking almost $10,000 for a drop camp hunt.
Yep,
I think they're like eight to nine. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was like $9,500 at the point when we talked to them.
Yeah, but man, I got buddies who go and have paid that a few times, and the moose that they come home are just slobs. I mean, they shoot some really cranking moose out there. It's really, yeah, I'd like to go do that someday too. I got to figure out how to make that happen. But yeah, so finding someone who's done it before, right? If you can kind of open up that door in a way that you're not just fishing for generic information, because imagine receiving a message, and we're kind of getting off on the tangent, because I was doing the high level thing on this list. But anyway, real quick, imagine being on Instagram or Facebook or whatever, and you get a direct message, and it's just like, hey, I want to moose hunt in Alaska. What should I do? It's like, you're not going to take the time to be like, well, here's exactly, how to do it. But if you got a message that was like, hey, man, I just saw, congrats on, your moose hunt a couple of years ago. I saw some pictures that you posted up. Looks like an awesome hunt. I'm in the middle of researching my hunt. This is what I figured out. I got X, Y, Z nailed down. I'm just kind of curious, maybe you have any insight into this, maybe not, but here's like a question that I have, and I'm not sure exactly how to get the answer to it,
Yeah.
Kind of a different approach, showing that you've done a lot of work, showing that you've put a lot of effort in, and also leaving the door, leaving an easy out for them. I think that's kind of nice too. So you're not trying to pin someone down to give an answer. And there's that feeling sometimes if you don't respond, you kind of feel bad, or but I don't know, man. I don't know if that's good or bad, but I always try to give somebody a really easy out. And,
that's kind of like, so I've had people ask me, what unit do you hunt in Colorado? Well, that's not on like, I don't respond in a rude way, but I'm not gonna, that's not what I'm gonna do. I'm not gonna do the homework for everybody, and I would never expect someone to do that myself. Right. Different things or when I call a biologist on a Western hunting side of things, I'm calling them, I'm saying, all right, this is the trailhead I'm looking at, this certain basin, this part of it I'm looking at. How are the elk numbers in this area? This is showing that I've already done this research, and I'm saying, oh, it looks like it might be a summer range. And I give, so that they know that I'm not just calling and being like, where are the elk at?
Right.
It's more to it. And I've had really good feedback, and I've gotten a lot of good information by doing it that way.
Yeah, it's almost just like you're throwing an idea out there and just looking for some confirmation, like, hey, am I on the right track?
Yep.
No, that's good stuff, man. And then, so that was the fourth thing. And then, just to move on quickly here, act fast is number 5. And that's what I tell people all the time is like, if you want to actually make it happen, you can plan and dream and think about planning a hunt until you're blue in the face, but until you put a few bucks down on the line and actually pick some dates, it's not going to happen. So you might as well, so I kind of describe in especially in the guides, like exactly what point in time to act and actually put some dates down and make things happen. And there's nothing better than putting money down, like getting out your credit card and putting a deposit on your air taxi. Because all of a sudden when you have money on the line, you're committed, right? Yeah. You might only have half your hunt planned, but you got the important half planned. The rest of it's going to fall into line. But, you're not going to go back on a $500,000 deposit, unless there's some kind of, tragedy or something, some kind of circumstances that are really major going to prevent you from going. So just to review those 5 steps are, Call them 5 secrets. But it's start with scarcity or start with why, prioritize, then procrastinate, focus more, research less. And that's that, getting those specific questions to do your research before you jump into it. Leveraging your network, reaching out on social media or internet forums or whatever, and then acting fast. And I think that those things, when you do them, when you combine those with those 10 questions, the who, what, when, where, why, how, and then the other 4 are, how are you going to get there and back? So your logistics, your travel logistics, where are you going to stay? So your lodging, what gear are you going to need? And then what are you going to eat? And I call those the hunt logistics. So those 4 questions, and save those for last. I don't, even though that's a lot of times where, it can be kind of the first place people go. It's like, oh, how are we going to get out there? Or where are we going to stay when we're there? Where we're going to hunt, like you said, like what unit do you hunt in Colorado? A lot of times that's the first dang question that everybody asks. But, if you want to do it right and you want to plan a really solid hunt that's going to give you what you're looking for, I really think that backing up and doing what you did and starting with that why component, I mean, that's the way to go. And so for you, Bo, you guys are saying you want an adventure, and you want to do it together, and you want a little bit of a type 2 fun.
Yep.
Right. And I would say that any hunt in Alaska is going to give you those things. That's right.
Yep.
Legitimately. So then, okay, so let me ask you this. If we're going to, if this is cool and you want to do this, so then the next step would be prioritize and procrastinate, or prioritize the 6 questions, right? Mm-hmm. So if we're talking about those hunt characteristics questions, I call them the who, what, when, where, why, and how. Those 6 questions. You've got why. Let's say we just put why as number 1. Okay. So the who, what, when, where, why, and how minus the why. What would the next priority be in your mind if you were just going to take a stab at it?
As far as how I already said, we want the adventure aspect, and we'd like to have, a reasonable chance of success. And then you're saying another component after that?
Yeah. So we're going to say why is the adventure, and the success. That's something that I think, unless you're a dedicated trophy hunter and willing to go home empty-handed if you don't find the animal that's up to your standards, most people are going up and want success. That's the hope when planning any hunt. But taking that into consideration, I think you got really good advice from the air taxis that you contacted, who said, yeah, legitimately, if you're going with 3 guys, it's probably realistic to shoot, that you'll have an opportunity to shoot 1 moose. Most likely not 2 or 3. It'd be awesome success moose hunting with 3 guys out of the same camp to kill 2 moose and get it all done in a 10-day time frame. If you're taking 2 weeks off. So
yeah.
So let's just leave the success component. Let's let that be for a minute, because I think that's kind of a given. So we'll say why and who. You've got your buddies picked out, right?
Yep.
But none of them have any limiting factors, like they're all in good health, they're all strong, capable.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. Nobody's afraid of water or heights?
Nope.
Okay.
I might be a little bit on the height standpoint, but
well, we're not planning a sheep or a goat hunt, so we should be okay.
Yeah. I'm working on it. Okay.
Yeah. Any limitations or preferences on when you're going to hunt? Time of year? Do you have any commitments back home or anything like that? Or are you guys blocking this out so you're just going to pick the best time to do whatever hunt you plan?
That's exactly right. We're planning our year around this hunt.
Okay, perfect. That's a solid way to do it. Okay, then I think it really comes down to how will you hunt, or what will you hunt are your other 2 options to kind of prioritize this. So what would be species? And we already talked about, the fact that you had started with moose, and then we're getting, some advice against that. So you're reconsidering. And then the other how would be rifle hunting versus bow hunting, float hunting versus mountain hunting, like a river float hunt, or if you insist on calling versus just wanting to do like a classic spot and stock hunt. Do you have any strong preferences for the style of hunt that you want to do?
So we kind of talked against the float idea. None of us have a lot of experience with that, and just didn't think that was a good idea to go that route. More or less, the mountain style hunt is kind of what we're looking for. As far as calling versus spot and stock, there's not really a huge preference. If I'd have to weigh one over the other, probably spot and stock.
Okay.
So that's kind of what we were looking at from that standpoint. And so to make it maybe a little easier for you to ask the questions here, let's say caribou just to make it for ease of talking.
Okay, let's say we'll go what, which is caribou. Okay, so we know the why, we know the who, we know the what. Mm-hmm. So that leaves the when, where, and how.
Yes.
So they're not important. When, where, and how is not important now. You've got the top three. That's what's important, right?
Yep.
So the when, where, and how, we can fill that in. What I mean by it's not important, it is important. You do have to choose, but it's not your primary. What you've done already is nailed down by just saying, for the sake of the discussion or, whatever you're going to go with caribou, that really nails it down. So you want a grand Alaskan adventure. You want to hunt with your buddies. And you want to hunt caribou, and we'll add with caribou, we'll kind of reinsert that little, you want to be successful piece. So you want a high odds or high percentage of success type hunt. So now what happens is, what type of a hunt at a high level you want. Now the information gap exists between what you've clarified that you want and what's actually available. And that's a huge information gap, right? Because you can't necessarily just figure it out by picking up a copy of the Alaska, Fish and Game Regulations and start poring over it. You can, but it's going to take how many hours to break it down across the state in terms of opportunities available that are going to fill, those characteristics that you've identified, meet those characteristics, and you even if you do that, you still don't know what the topography is going to be like. What kind of a hunt experience you're going to walk into, what the weather is going to be like in different areas. There's still a lot of information left out, right?
Yeah, no, definitely.
Yeah. So this is where it's time to do a little bit of research, right? Is like, okay, we're doing caribou. We can do it any time of year. It's three of you guys hunting, no limitations there. So that's really not a major deal. And now we got to go find a caribou hunt somewhere that's going to be a grand adventure. Well, any caribou hunt in Alaska is going to be a great adventure if you've never done it before. Right. Mm-hmm. You don't want to do a float hunt. So we're talking most likely a fly-in drop camp style hunt. And so you're not going to be limited to river systems or anything like that. There's pros and cons of doing a fly-out drop hunt versus a float hunt. But I'm kind of with you on it in terms of, like, if you don't have river experience, I think a mountainous or hill country hunt makes a lot of sense, right? And caribou, they're good sized animals, but they're not huge. They're kind of between mule deer and elk. Big one will be almost elk size, body size, but some of the herds have some smaller bodies, so more like large mule deer buck size. And so a couple guys, three guys, you get a bull down, you can easily get it packed back in one trip if you all go out and haul a load. So that all makes a lot of sense, in terms of just being this far into the initial hunt planning process. Mm-hmm. So what to do next? So we need to figure out how to find out what the best opportunity for you is going to be. And this is honestly, like, it might sound kind of dumb or kind of like self-promoting, but this is why I created Alaska DIY, is to fill this gap that we're looking at right now. Right. And so I can tell you a couple of suggestions right off the top of my head that's going to save you some time in researching. Or we could just like reconvene later and let you, talk offline or something like that and let you do some research and get back on. But Do you want me to just lay out some herds that are worth focusing on and some regions just based on kind of what I know high level about caribou opportunities in Alaska?
Yeah, let's do that. Let's go down to that, and then that'll give a little bit more information for more of a focus kind of research there.
Okay, cool. So there are several herds, caribou herds in Alaska. Caribou are really interesting animals. They're unlike anything in the lower 48, but if you had to pick one animal in the lower 48 that they're most similar to, it would probably be pronghorn antelope, even though pronghorn don't herd up in these huge herds and migrate hundreds or even thousands of miles. But they have some similarities there. They don't behave like elk. They don't behave like deer, mule deer, or whitetails. So they're kind of a different critter. And the herds some herds intermix more than others. Some are very isolated, but the state basically divides them up into distinct herds for management purposes. Some of these herds are very large, numbering 50, 100, 200 plus thousand animals. Some herds are very small. It might be just a few thousand animals in a small mountain range, and that's basically a recognized distinct herd from other caribou. But it's just like, they're animals. They don't necessarily obey political boundaries or, whatever biologists, determine as quote unquote, herd populations. So there is some intermixing, but just for the sake of helping listeners understand what I'm talking about when I start to rattle off some herd names, there's I can't remember how many there are. There's 30 plus, I think, distinct herds in Alaska that the state manages. But there's 3 or 4 of most interest to hunters, in my opinion, coming up from the lower 48 to pay attention to. And so most of those are far northern herds across the state. A lot of the herds in the south and kind of central area are either small or have declined significantly. So another thing to point out too, at the risk of just rambling on too much, is that if anybody listening does want to do a caribou hunt, the caribou situation is a bit uncertain right now, and the numbers across North America are down significantly. This is not hunting related from any research that I've ever seen. It is population dynamics that are changing at a rate that is much faster than anything that could be hunting induced, especially since there's already, seasons and bag limits in place and the herds are actively managed. But several hunting opportunities in Canada have been shut down for caribou, and Alaska's herds are actually at low levels right now, several of those herds. So not all of them, but several of them are. Now, that said, caribou herds do experience cyclical population dynamics. So do you guys have like ruffed grouse or snowshoe hares or anything like that does kind of like a 10-year cycle of boom and bust that you're familiar with?
Yeah, actually right now the grouse population's at like an all-time low in Pennsylvania. And they've actually they reopened it this year, but for a couple years there they shut down the later season of it.
Okay, cool. And I'm guessing in 4, 5, 6 years, it'll probably be, at a high, or if it follows the trends. Does that sound about right?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So caribou are really similar to that, but right now I think, just from talking to some biologists, that the herds are lower. They're low. They're lower than typical, and they're really hoping to see some of these herds bounce back. I know one herd, the Central Arctic herd in Alaska, which if you did the Haul Road caribou hunt and just drove up the Haul Road, that's the herd you would hunt. And they didn't survey last year, but they did it in 2017, and then they're slated again to survey this year in 2019. And it seems to have stabilized, but now we're almost 2 years behind on data. So it'll be interesting to see what the new data says when they get a chance to do that population survey. I think it's July they'll do that. But some main herds, dude, I'm sorry, I talk a lot, man, but
no, you're
trying
good.
to give a little background on the caribou up here in Alaska. But the main herds that you'd want to look at or regions would be like the northwestern Alaska, which is the Western Arctic herd, Central Arctic herd in north central Alaska. And the porcupine herd is a herd that would be it would be a great herd to hunt if it actually stayed in Alaska reliably. But there's been a couple of years ago, like the entire herd of like, I don't know what it is, 300, 400,000 animals just like went to Canada. And they typically, seriously, they typically do migrate into Canada, especially more in the wintertime. But they usually kind of remnants of that herd scattered in certain areas in eastern Alaska as well. But yeah, a couple of years ago, I think basically the whole herd just left the state, and air taxis and guides up there were basically, I mean, they didn't have anything to hunt. They had hunters booked and kind of a rough situation. So I have been reluctant to to recommend the porcupine herd as a good viable option just because of that, because that herd is especially very migratory and can leave. Like I said, they don't obey political boundaries, right? So they could just leave the state and you have nothing to hunt if you plan that hunt. So but that's a large herd. That's one of the largest herds in Alaska. So those three herds are three of the largest currently in the state. And then another great option would be like the 40-mile herd. So that's a few things that I'm just throwing out there at high level. I'm digging into a little of the details that are in the guide, but I'm just, it's good information. So I'm not giving too much away. There's still a ton of logistics and stuff that we won't get a chance to get into in this conversation. But those are great options, and those three hunts, especially like the Western Arctic herd, the Central Arctic herd, and the 40-mile herd, are all going to offer like these very iconic North Country tundra, air taxi, or in the case of the Haul Road, you could literally just do kind of an epic, cool road trip to get out there. And you could also combine that with an air taxi flight as well. So there's just a lot of options, but they're going to give you that high adventure Alaskan experience that you're looking for, man. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, and it's so we had talked about we're definitely not against doing the haul road, that even though if it wouldn't require an air taxi or whatever, that's an option. We're all bow hunters and not afraid to get a gun out either, but primarily bow hunters, and I think that would be a really, really cool hunt. And you do have a guide out on that, correct?
I do, yeah. So I have a how-to guide on the website right now. And I should get you a promo code. We should do that and put it in the show notes if anybody listening is like all of a sudden super excited about that opportunity. But it shows, it just walks through like A to Z how to plan that hunt, flying in, into Alaska, renting a vehicle and driving up the Haul Road. And it's really one of the most economical hunts that you can do in Alaska. And I did a podcast with Brian Barney. Do you know his podcast?
Yeah.
Eastman's Elevated?
Yeah, I have that one downloaded to listen, but I haven't listened to it yet.
Oh, cool. Well, I just went up and did that hunt for the first time last August, and I wasn't sure what to think. I went up and did it by myself, and I wasn't really sure what to expect in terms of it being basically a road hunt. But I did take a rifle, not a bow, and we'll talk about that in just a minute since you brought that up, because it does have some significance for that hunt. But I took a rifle, so I did a fair amount of walking and hiking and getting away from the road, and it was a great, cool, awesome wild country wilderness type experience. And so I was curious what Brian thought about it when we were chatting with that podcast. So I posed the question to him, like on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate that hunt in terms of adventure, like Alaskan adventure, as a total experience? And he was like a 9, and I really felt the same way after being up there. Which I have heard that criticism before, that, I don't want to do a road hunt. I want to do a real Alaska hunt. And I'm like, well, it's a dirt road, winding hundreds of miles through vast roadless wilderness. So it like gives you access to real Alaska. If you stayed on the road and you hunted from the road, like we've all seen hunters do no matter where you live, I think, then you might be lacking some classic iconic Alaskan experience there, wilderness experience. But you don't have to hike very far across that tundra to get into some amazing country and really get that true adventure experience. So that's a great option. But no, the bow hunting thing that you're talking about, there's a corridor along the Haul Road which is also called the Dalton Highway, or its official name. Its real name is the Dalton Highway. And there's a 5-mile corridor on either side of that road that's bow hunting only. So I'm sure you've looked into that, Bo, since you're familiar with that.
Yep. Yeah, and then outside of that 5-mile range, then you can use a rifle, correct?
Right. And you cannot use, four-wheelers or anything like that to get outside the 5 miles. So you're hiking basically, or flying out, with an air taxi, or there's actually, there's some guys there that they'll take you out in boats too and drop you off on the river system. So,
okay. So with the haul road, that's, that kind of experience, you can still get that Alaskan experience, even though, like, when I first heard of it, I thought of it as kind of the way you describe most people thinking of it, as like a road hunt, and kind of wrote it off as something. And then the more I've heard people talk about it, yourself and others, that it's a pretty amazing, you can have some awesome opportunities there. And that's like, going back to, the who, with who I'm going with and everything, it's a great chance to be able to be with, a group of people and have a good experience that way too.
Yeah, for sure. Well, anytime you add that dynamic, a road trip just is so much fun, right? Like just hanging out with buddies and I don't know. I did it solo, and I love road trips because when we moved up here from Washington State a couple of years ago, and so I hunted Washington, Oregon, Idaho quite a bit. And so my favorite getaways were always jumping I'd have my truck all packed up, even whether it was a weekend hunt or a week or two away, I'd have it all packed up and sitting there at work, and I'd jump off or get off of work and jump in. And it always started with a road trip where I was super pumped up to go hit the elk mountains or something like that, and so I think that even if you're not a road hunter, that road trip aspect for me is almost nostalgic. It's like, oh yeah, it's on now. We're hitting the highway going 70, listening to tunes, and just super stoked about what the next few days is going to hold. And so in a weird but very Alaska flavored way, the haul road offers that same experience that's so familiar. Like, and that's what you're doing too, Bo. I mean, you're talking to folks about, hey, how do Eastern hunters, learn to get out west and do the mule deer thing and the elk thing and cut the learning curve and figure out how to make it happen. And I'm sure most people that you talk to, and yourself included, I imagine you're jumping in your truck and hitting the road.
Oh yeah, that's one of the coolest parts is I never was west of the Mississippi, and just getting this drive through all the states and just seeing things, and it definitely helps when you have people with you. Last year on my way back from Colorado, I drove 27 hours straight by myself, and that was a little rough, but and I'd only slept for maybe an hour out of the whole thing, so that was rough. But when you're with buddies and everything else, that's part of the trip.
Yeah, for sure, man. That's cool. Hey, here, if you want to just turn this whole thing on its head a little bit, I mean, you guys, you'd have to get on the maps and figure it out, but you could legitimately add another week or 10 days to your trip and just drive from your house all the way up there.
That would be an adventure. And again, I don't want to go on a huge tangent here, but my grandfather lived in Alaska for a while.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and he's more excited to think about the trip than we are, and he's not even going. He's in his mid 80s, but he was a fire jumper up there.
Oh,
so
okay, yeah.
and did that and lived in the wilderness for 30 days at a time fighting fires but he drove there a couple times and said it's an amazing drive and everything else, but. Yeah,
dude, that drive is awesome. You know what I've thought about, man? And I've thought about this when I was writing the guide. I was like, okay, if I still lived in Washington and I was going to come up and do this, I would get either my dad or my father-in-law, and I'd get them like with one of my boys, my oldest boy's getting his permit right now, and I was like, I would hook those two up and load up the truck and send them up to Alaska in our rig, all loaded down with camping gear and stuff like that. And then I'd fly up there and have them pick me up at the airport like a few days later or a week later, so I didn't have to miss so much work. And then we'd all go hunting, and then I could fly home and they could drive it all back home. But yeah, I think that could be a really cool experience for everyone involved. But that's a wild tangent, dude. But people do it. I've talked to people who have done it, and even from the East Coast, man. Time is the issue right there.
Yeah, no, definitely. Maybe we can all quit our jobs and just make it a life experience.
That's basically what I did.
Yeah,
in a way. Yeah, in a way.
Yeah, no. But as far as the last question I kind of have here before, maybe, like I said, before we start talking here for the listeners' standpoint, we're going to make this kind of like a two-part thing. So as you've kind of steered me in certain directions, I'll do some more research with the guys and, talk about some things and make sure we're in alignment with the goals and everything else and what we want out of it. And then also get some feedback from you, the listeners, and see what questions you have to kind of further along this discussion. But the one question I do have is, is it like a realistic possibility to like spot and stalk and like kind of like a mountainous? I'm thinking almost like a, how do I want to explain this? Kind of like a mountainous type terrain.
Yeah, do you want a sheep hunt that's a caribou hunt kind of a thing?
Yeah, I mean, possibly.
Yeah, I mean, hey, back when we were in Washington, that's what I loved, hunting mule deer in the Alpine, and it was just like a go hunt or a sheep hunt, like a poor man's sheep hunt, because has all, everything that a sheep hunt offers. You can get hunting, the Cascades or the Rocky Mountains above timberline. And yet, it's an over-the-counter tag and a cheap tag, but that experience is there, the quality of the adventure and the wilderness experience. So, no, I get what you're saying, man. If you're looking for like mountain terrain, there are some opportunities. It depends on how mountainous you want it to be. But yeah, that would be a great question for transporters. And I would still I would kind of rule out the Central Arctic herd if that is something that you're really looking for, like that's very important to you or a high priority, which I would consider, how will you hunt? That question. I would lump that into that, because you're saying like, how will you hunt? It's like, what type of a hunt or what type of an experience are you looking for? That one, to me, kind of encompasses several different things, including weapon, including, float hunt versus dry land hunt versus like what you're saying, mountain hunt, right?
Yeah.
No, but there's something very appealing about that. Caribou absolutely do live in the mountains in smaller numbers, but you can get on them reliably. That's a great question for air taxis, and I would be looking more at the 40-mile herd and the Western Arctic herd and contacting air taxis that fly, do drop camps with access to those herds.
Myself, where I've hunted elk typically in Colorado, a lot of the first even 2 to 3 years here that I've hunted them above timberline and around timberline. I love the high country. And Michael and Mason, who I'm going with, they've hunted mule deer just about exclusively. Mason was on my first elk hunt, but they've fallen in love with high country mule deer, spot and stalk style. And I know that was something that, piqued a lot of interest if that was a possibility for caribou.
Yeah, for sure. It is a possibility. You're definitely limiting your options, but that doesn't mean anything really, that you're just narrowing down exactly what you want out of your experience. That's going to actually help you kind of, choose out of all the different air taxis and transporters out there offering all the different hunts. That's going to be a big one that's going to help you narrow it down. So if that's something that's important to you guys that you really want out of your hunt, then I would say, if we're talking about those 6 hunt characteristics questions, then I would say that we would prioritize that pretty high, and that will make some of the other stuff a lot easier. When you're like trying to choose where, all of a sudden becomes really simple if you've limited the style of hunt down. That's going to narrow out or weed out a lot of the possibilities.
Yeah. So how about like I said, I'll get with these guys and kind of narrow down that what we want to do from that, and we can revisit it and see if there's anything else that that you'd be able to help me out with and help the listeners out with from that style of a hunt, and then also like just like a Q&A type deal.
Yeah, and dude, honestly, I would love to hear from your listeners, Eastern hunters, what kind of questions they have about Alaska, and I'll just be really straightforward too. Is I'm not an expert at putting out this information or developing online courses. It's like a lot of it's trial and error for me. And so what I've done right now is I have standalone courses that are like, I have a Kodiak Sitka Blacktail guide. That's one product. I have a Haul Road Caribou guide, like we mentioned. That's another product. I have an ADAC Caribou guide. That's another product. But there's a lot of duplicate information between them, and they're at a fairly high price point. I think I have had, a few people comment on the prices. So right now the Kodiak Sitka Blacktail guide's like $200 on the website, but I often give out coupons and it's around $150, right? The Caribou guides are like normally priced at like $250 and off. Oftentimes I'll drop coupons or something like that, or special offers, and drop them down to $200. So initially I think that sounds like a really high price, and I think that some of the feedback that I've gotten from people, and Bo, you and I were talking about this before the podcast, is that they don't, like, somebody interested in hunting in Alaska doesn't necessarily know if that's the hunt that they want to do, and so they're not willing to fork over $200 for the information to plan that specific hunt. And that's just the way that I've kind of like developed the products, but I'm not stuck to, like, I'm not locked into that. So I'm kind of curious, like, I'm thinking about if people are interested in it, pulling a lot of that duplicate information out that's more just general, like, a 101 course on how to hunt in Alaska, like a lot of just general high level information with some introductory info on moose and caribou and Sitka blacktail and black bear and stuff like that, just real high level stuff, but at a much cheaper price point, so you can kind of get a better feel, like more of a general education on how to hunt in Alaska and what it takes. And then if you wanted to plan a specific hunt, then I maybe drop the prices of those other standalone guides or something. Just make it more approachable. So I'm really curious if your readers have like specific questions on what they want answered. Like, I'm always interested in hearing that so that I can make the products, as valuable and as informative as possible. But also, like, yeah, I'm just kind of curious, just in general, where people are at in terms of, what kind of information they want, what they're willing to pay for it. So
yeah, and Abe, that's something like, I don't think that. I mean, yes, it may sound like a high price point, but I think if that, say you want to do a haul road hunt, I don't think dropping $250 would be a big deal in the scheme of things. If it can limit your time with figuring out some of those logistics, and it helps you in that process, I think that's more than valuable. It's worth the money. It's just like, yeah, I get what you're saying, and kind of where I was at with it before I even met you. If I would say I was 100% on a haul road hunt, I would have bought your course and went through it. But it's just sometimes I think that, again, from my perspective, that it's difficult to figure out exactly what you want to do first.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I would love to hear from your listeners if they want to chime in and leave. I don't know what kind of avenue you have for them to get information to you, but be really interesting to hear just, what's going through their head as they listen to us talk, because we're kind of wrapped up in this conversation. But, I sometimes when I'm listening to conversations, I'm like out loud, like chiming in and,
Yeah.
So I'm sure a lot of people have questions and have thoughts about what we're saying. I would love to hear, some of that stuff. But no, I think you're right. I think there's more of a need for general information. And just as a quick note on the price point is like, dude, there's a ton of value that I pack into those guides. I think they're worth, every penny that I'm asking and then more. I put a lot of cost saving stuff in there. So there's a lot of ways where if you really implemented it and you needed to save money, you can save more than the cost of the guide on your first trip to Alaska, as well as avoiding a lot of common mistakes that I see. You're just going to go way better prepared. And then, and then there's nitty gritty detail like, hey, here's where I recommend staying, in this town, and here's the vehicle that I recommend renting if you're going to rent a vehicle, and here's what the migration patterns of this herd are doing this time of year. And so it's just like, I think there's a lot of value in those things. That's what I'm trying to provide. Like, I'm definitely trying to help people out, and it's a labor of love for me, for sure.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, Abe, where can people find this information on your guides and everything else that you're kind of putting out here with Alaska DIY?
Yeah, for sure. So the website is huntalaskadiy.com. So you got to add the hunt in there. So somebody already got Alaska DIY before I came along, but it's just yeah. So hunt. I mean, it works, but www.huntalaskadiy.com, and then I'm on Instagram at Alaska_DIY. I'm not. Are you on Facebook very much, Bo?
Yeah, I have Facebook and I use it, but it's not my number one way of with traffic and everything. It's a little bit. I don't know. I don't like Facebook, but I felt like it was kind of a necessary evil.
Yeah, I have a Alaska DIY Facebook account, and I just copy there's that function where you can copy everything over from Instagram to Facebook. So I don't pay that much attention to Facebook, unfortunately. So if you're really active on Facebook, I apologize. You can see some of my posts on there from Alaska DIY, but I really don't interact that much on there because I just don't like it. I feel like it was really cool a few years ago, and then our parents got a hold of it, and
yeah.
So anyway, not a criticism. I just enjoy Instagram more. So and then I have a podcast too, man. So an Alaska DIY podcast that's on, iTunes and Stitcher and some of the common places where you can find them. I did. Have you seen the podcast?
Yeah. I've listened to a few episodes on there actually.
Oh, cool, man. I did just put out a couple of weeks ago a podcast with Steve Opat. I don't know if you saw that one. But since we were talking about the haul road, he's been caribou hunting up there like a dozen times. He's probably logged close to 10,000 miles on the haul road. So that's what I called it. I was like 10,000 miles on the haul road. I think it's episode 14 or 15. I'm kind of, I started the podcast project when I had a lot of time. Then all of a sudden I got really serious about guiding. And so I'm crawling along at a snail's pace in terms of putting out episodes, but I still really enjoy it. So
cool.
But that's a good one to listen to. So.
Yeah, definitely. I'll be checking that one out as we start again going in the next stages of planning here.
Yeah, man, for sure. And then, so the next steps here would be for you guys to take a look at those herds that I mentioned. And we can talk a little bit more offline about the mountain aspect of that since you brought that up there kind of at the end. You can start doing some very specific research in terms of Googling the Western Arctic herd or air taxis that do hunts for the Western Arctic herd, and then you'll get specific people to talk to. You can find it, once you start looking into that a little bit, the Western Arctic for an example of the few herds that I named. Once you start looking into that stuff a little bit, you can start to surf social media and search hashtags and start to find people. You can even start to kind of recognize areas or shout out, DM them and say, hey, was this in this area of Alaska by chance? Awesome picture. I just was wondering if it was from over here. And usually if you do that kind of approach, people, are pretty open, you're asking a pretty innocent question. And then you can kind of get a feel from pictures sometimes how mountainous or what the terrain looks like or, or maybe just open the door to oh, cool. Well, who did you end up flying with? We're actually researching air taxis in that area or something like that. It's a pretty natural way to start a conversation. So, that would be next steps, and then once you get that component figured out of what herd you want to focus on, then we jump into travel logistics and away we go.
Sounds good, Abe. Hey, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk here and help educate myself selfishly as well as the listeners to learn a little bit about, the planning a trip to Alaska and showing that it's not, out of the question. It's something that's 100% possible with some planning and as you stated, focus planning.
Yeah, for sure. I just think it helps so much. You know what I mean? It helps make it manageable. And yeah, if we do get a chance to jump on the call again, I might even ask you to get out your credit card or something at some point. No, get to that act fast part. No, but that's how you guys are committed. I got faith that you guys are going to make it happen. Just how serious you guys have researched it so far. But dude, look, for me, coming up to Alaska and getting out and doing these hunts has been like literally quite life changing. It's allowed me to really live a lifestyle and have experiences that I've always dreamed about having. And I feel like I am who I want to be, or who I was meant to be is a little bit cheesy, but I feel like I'm in my own as a human being when I'm out there on the mountain in Alaska and in wild places. And so I guess if I can share the inspiration or courage or a little bit of the information with folks that they might have a similar experience, then that's super worthwhile to me. And that's super valuable. Like it's an opportunity. I guess I look at Alaska DIY as an opportunity to potentially change someone's life just by, showing them that this is possible, So yeah, man.
For sure.
Hope it's helpful.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of good information here. And like I said, Abe, I really appreciate you taking the time and going through all this.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for putting this together, and so we can get on here and chat, man. We need to do this in person sometime so we can drink some beers and chill out and yeah.
I think we're gonna have to make that happen.
Yeah, well, if you're coming up here, actually, never mind. You're going to be coming up here during hunting season. I'll be gone. We'll have to definitely get together sometime. Did you? Are you pretty active with BHA?
Yeah, I am.
Did you go to the rendezvous?
I did not. I'm going to. They're having like an Eastern rendezvous called Muster on the Mountain here in Pennsylvania for all the East Coast people here in June, and I'll be going to that.
Oh, awesome! That'll be cool.
Yeah, I want to make it out to Boise one of these years. It's just I had to look at with my vacation time from work, either spending it going there or on a hunt, and I picked hunting.
Yeah, that's a pretty good call, man. I was just looking for some excuse to have a chance to sit down and grab a beer and I don't know if you cuss on here, but I was going to say and bullshit a bunch, but you can edit that out if you don't cuss.
No,
but yeah, man, we'll make it
no
happen.
limits on here.
Oh, okay, cool. Well, shit, man, you should have told me sooner. No, it's awesome, man. Well, we can wrap this up. I'm sure you're more. It's probably like going on 11 o'clock there, isn't it?
Oh yeah, it's getting a little late, but no, it was a good conversation, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks so much, Bo.
All right, Abe. Well, we'll talk to you soon here, and yeah, enjoy the nice spring, summer weather there.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of East Meets West Hunt with your host, Bo Martonic. For more great content and to stay up to date, visit eastmeetswesthunt.com, Facebook at East Meets West Outdoors, and Instagram at East Meets West Hunt. If you enjoyed today's episode, please review and subscribe, and we'll catch you next time.